Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. As said, my name is Charles Reed Anderson, and I'm going to talk about the state of the market with smart cities. And more specifically, what I'm going to look at is smart cities going forward. And I've titled the presentation, The Obstacle is the Way. And I'm sure some people are scratching their heads wondering why I've come up with this title. And it actually goes back to the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius. And it's built off something he had said in the past, obviously. The impediment to action advances action, and what stands in the way becomes the way. Now, you're probably wondering what this has to do with smart cities. And I'll take you back a few months ago. There was a lot of reports coming out with the results of the pandemic that this was going to be disastrous for smart cities because there's going to be budget shortfalls everywhere. People don't know where things are going. At that same time, though, I was getting contacted by a lot of my clients and a lot of new clients as well that were aggressively looking to deploy new solutions. So basically, what I'm realizing is yes, the greatest impediment we've faced probably in my lifetime is the coronavirus pandemic. However, this is the thing that is actually going to start moving forward smart cities. And if you think about it, things like IoT, prop tech, smart cities, they're buzzwords that have been overhyped for many years. We haven't delivered against the promise. What's happening now is because of the pandemic, it's giving us this compelling event. And I truly do believe that the market will move forward. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about why. But first, I'll also give you an overview of what we're going to be talking about. So number one, I'm going to be talking about why I'm optimistic about smart cities in 21. As Levin mentioned, I know I've considered myself a pragmatist. I would rarely say I'm overly optimistic about technology. So it's going to be interesting to see why I actually am optimistic this time, because as many of you will know, who know me, I'm not that way about technology a lot. Number two, I'm going to talk about what we need to do as an ecosystem to improve on this, to make it easier for these solutions and drive innovation to market. And the final thing, of course, we're going to have some fun because everybody always wants to know which city is the smartest. And I'm going to give you the definitive answer today. So let's kick it off. So why am I suddenly optimistic when I'm normally a cranky old man? And like I said, there is reasons for optimism because it isn't just about this pandemic. Throughout time, whenever you look at periods of crisis, we tend to see a lot of innovation. And what happens during those times is crises give us a common purpose. So we have a goal we're all going to be working towards. So that's the way it starts out. What it also allows us to do is look at the world differently. What I'm amazed by over the last, I would say, 6 or 8 months is how many people are revisiting all the different areas of their businesses, their cities, and saying, okay, this is how we've done it in the past. How can we do it better going forward? So it gives you that chance to actually take a risk and try and do something differently. And finally, it forces us to be action oriented. We don't have a choice but to act right now. We need to implement certain solutions to keep our cities going and move them forward. So there is reasons to be optimistic about this. And in particular, when it comes to cities, I think there's three components that are really going to be driving this. The first is we need to create safe spaces. And that can be buildings, that can be restaurants, city centers, you name it. We need to create places that are safe for the citizens to get back involved. Number two, once we've done that, you're going to see cities and businesses and vendors focus on shifting to cost cutting and efficiency mode. Pandemic has hurt a lot of industries, so therefore that we need to be cautious in the way we move forward, and they're going to find ways to try and drive operational excellence. And finally, we're going to look at how increased regulation is going to drive innovation. But let's get going on this. So the problem we do face is we want safe cities and people want to get back out there. But in somewhere like Singapore, which is where I am, 27% of the population say they don't feel safe returning to the office. And Singapore is probably one of the safest places in the world, I would say next to somewhere like Taipei or New Zealand. But we're still concerned about it. But what it is even though we're concerned about it, we still want to go back there because we actually miss the human contact. And this is a survey of 7,000 people from a few months ago. And I don't think people really miss going in to see their boss face to face. What they miss is almost like they're doing working together with people, the coffee chats that you get to have around the office. So we need to create these spaces to get people back together. And the good news is it's actually possible with existing solutions we've had. If you think about it, when the coronavirus came in, we didn't suddenly start doing visual analytics and spatial intelligence. or developing contactless entries and thermal monitors to measure people's temperatures when they enter the buildings. These solutions have been around, but they weren't being adopted because there wasn't that compelling event. So what's happening now is all these things have come to the forefront and people are adopting them, and it's giving us a reason to start generating market demand. So while these industries were lagging before and not really taking off, suddenly it's really kicked off and it's become a lot more exciting. But there is a problem with this, and it is going to create a lot of challenges. So think about it just from a data perspective. All of those solutions I was just talking about, whether it's the contactless entry, spatial analytics, autonomous robots for cleaning, they create more data, and that all sits on more platforms. But that doesn't mean we're going to have more intelligence. It means we just have more data we somehow have to manage. That's also a problem because some governments or some landlords are going to have reporting requirements where you have to show that you're enforcing social distancing and have a limited number of people in there. So we have to overcome that challenge on the data side. There's also the people side. Especially in Europe, this is going to be a challenge because people there are a lot less trusting, and with GDPR, how are you going to be able to do employee contact tracing within the building without breaching any regulations? You have to think about business continuity planning going forward. Should you be tracking your senior execs even more closely? Is that legal even in some countries? And then we have to think about the safety of the frontline staff that are out there. The other thing we need to think about is the processes. We're going to have to redesign a lot of the ways that people work inside of the offices. This can require a lot more employee training. We need to have new policies and enforcement for visitors when they come in. And then finally, in the governance, yes, we need to show that we're actually monitoring and enforcing these policies and creating safe environments. If not, we are going to expose ourselves to HR and legal risks, and there's going to be ethical dilemmas along the way. So it is going to be a challenge. The good thing is this means everybody's coming together. It's not just somebody who sits in IT trying to deploy a new solution. What's happening is everyone's coming together to try and solve this problem and move it forward. So that's why I'm a bit optimistic. That second wave is where people try to find the holy grail. And this is, how do you increase efficiency while still reducing your costs? And if you look at the current state of cities, we have too much data. There's too many different platforms, and we're not getting enough actionable intelligence out of it. So we need to overcome this because that'll allow us to have more financially sustainable cities. So think about it from this perspective, and it's just looking at it from lifts or elevators. Imagine if these three lifts ran on three different platforms. So the one on the left would be a Kone lift, then ThyssenKrupp and Schindler. That's three different platforms you'd have to manage. You'd have to be doing predictive maintenance on those three different platforms, and there's no way to aggregate it all together. Now, that's complicated for these three, but now imagine if you're Singapore's Housing and Development Board. They've got hundreds, if not thousands of buildings. They've got dozens of different lift manufacturers, and they're trying to manage this effectively. And it's, how do you start aggregating these platforms? And the technology industry hasn't actually been good at doing that. And it's going to get only worse because this just talks about three lifts. Now, when you start thinking about all these different platforms that we're going to have inside of our office that we have to manage, if you try to manage them individually, it's very difficult. If you're a city and you've got hundreds of buildings, trying to manage this is going to be a nightmare. So this is what we call the platform of platforms game. And there's vendors that are coming in across the top to say, fine, I'll take all this information and give you one common platform across the top that you can use to access this data. And it's quite an interesting one because what it gives you is that single version of truth. It also allows you to improve the asset performance because you get better visibility of what's going on when something's going to break down. It'll help you improve your asset life, and this will help you reduce your costs. And like I said, these solutions have been around for quite a while. They haven't been widely adopted, but are starting to see a lot more. So who's actually solving this? Well, these are the three examples of who I'm following in the space. And one of them I call the adjacent approach, which is from Bosch. So Bosch actually looked at that HDB lift problem and built out a management solution that will work with any different lift manufacturer. What's interesting is Bosch doesn't make lifts, but allows them to enter into an adjacent market because they've got the platform and they know how to build that. They partnered with Tuzud and they were able to bring that to market, and they've got a very compelling solution they're now taking out globally. So that's one approach just for a building or a number of buildings. But what if you have a whole city? So the one that I'm tracking there quite a bit is Hitachi, and their strategy for working, especially with precincts, is by far the most advanced that I've seen. And they're not only aggregating together all of those different platforms that run your city or your precinct, but they're actually going to be sorting out all your infrastructure purchases as well, which means you can leverage common infrastructure, which helps reduce the costs. Now they're taking all that data they're creating and they're then going out and generating all these new revenue opportunities. So they're basically creating consumer data ecosystems that they can take to market, and they're partnering with consumer brands on this. This is still very early. The best example they have right now is Bhartiya city in India. It's a greenfield development. Like I said, it's like nothing I've seen before. So I would highly recommend giving it a look if you have a chance. And the other one I'll look at now, I call the opportunistic approach. And this one I really like because Microsoft with Azure is partnering with Telstra, the mobile operator out of Australia. And what they're creating is digital twins for commercial buildings. Now think about that. Like, this isn't a real estate company doing it. It's Azure leveraging its analytics platform, and it's Telstra saying, well, we've got customers anyway, so why would they do that? It's opportunistic because the challenge we face in here isn't a real estate industry challenge. It's a data problem. And basically, what is Azure good at? They're good at data. What does Telstra have? Every enterprise customer in Australia for the most part, which means you combine that together. It's a great way to go into a whole new market. So this isn't a market adjacent move. This is brand new from scratch. So keep an eye on this. I would also keep a close eye on AWS and Google, as I would imagine they'd be looking at the same thing. You don't have to be a real estate expert. We need data experts to solve this problem. So the final part on this, regulations. Already we're seeing a lot of regulations coming out about green buildings and sustainability. Now, what I want to say is in Europe, you're pretty far advanced with this. In Australia, advanced. In Asia, we've been lagging behind, but that's changing now, and you're seeing a lot more announcements which will drive that. That will start forcing investors to start investing in better materials. It'll create a whole new market for innovation in Asia, which we haven't seen previously. The next thing I'm waiting to see is more regulations around AI and data privacy. Right now, we're held back a bit because we don't know what is acceptable use of personal data if it's captured from facial recognition, or if we capture vehicle data. What is acceptable use of that? And now you're seeing governments finally going out there and setting in place policies that say this is what you can do with that data. Singapore's IMDA, which is the regulator here, just created an AI governance framework and started sharing that out across the region to give people a good guideline on how you should be leveraging this data and how you can do it while it's still secure and not violating any data privacy laws. And the final one I'm really looking forward to is about drones and autonomous vehicles. So if you would have asked me 6-8 months ago if I would really be interested in investing in things like drones and AVs, I thought it was too early because it was too fragmented and cities weren't adopting it quick enough and not putting in policies and procedures to make it easy to take them to market. Scrap that, we're starting over. Everybody knows that we need to be prepared if this goes on, or if there's another emergency situation or pandemic. So they're starting to find ways and allowing regulations to come into place to start to encourage the use of drones and autonomous vehicles for new solutions. So this is going to drive another wave of innovation. So that's phase one. Now, what do we need to do as an industry, or more importantly, as an ecosystem? And a lot of it involves something like this picture. It's getting people to work together. And let me explain why that's important. If you look at the ecosystem, in theory, what we're doing isn't rocket science. What we're trying to do is leverage technology to solve the problems that our cities face, whether it's carbon emissions or clean energy or driving efficiency. The challenge is when you stick in the tens of thousands of entities that sit there, your cities, and it's not just about dealing with one person in a city. Every city is going to have 25 to 30 agencies, and it's all broken down into sub-districts, and you've got to consider the citizens. And then you've got on the supply side, the vendors and the startups, and those startups are great at driving innovation, but it's so difficult for them to engage with those vendors or with those cities because of how fragmented the market is. Now, across the top of all of that, you throw in regulation, which can come in at a city level, it can come in at a national level, some international levels as well. And then the investment side. So who's going to be funding these types of initiatives? Is it the PPP side? Is it the venture capital side supporting the startups? It is very complex. So what we need as an industry is basically more people coming in the center and becoming these ecosystem hubs. If you look at what I really do with my consulting firm, I try to be a hub like that, but I'm one person, so I'm very limited in what I can do. We need more people who try to bring together cross ecosystem collaboration, and that will enable us to fast track innovation and the adoption of these solutions that are going to transform the way we live, work, and play in our cities. So on that, what's best practice for engagement? And I still go back to this. It's a couple years old, but it's still the best platform I've seen for driving innovation with the city. And this came out from Taipei a couple years ago with their Smart Taipei initiative. Their objective is nothing fancy. It's government as a platform and city as a living lab. A lot of people talk about that, but the approach they took to deliver it was unique. So let me give you some ideas. They actually pulled the PMO out of the government and then made the government agencies, those 30 government agencies, customers of the PMO. So they basically controlled all the demand that was required, all the solutions they were looking for, then get sent out to the PMO. They also had to capture market demand from the citizens. So they went out and surveyed 32,000 citizens across a number of different platforms, some email-based, some Facebook-based, face-to-face discussions with people. So they know within each district what citizens are looking for. And then what they did, now that they had all of that demand, they went out and proactively engaged 400 plus ICT vendors, and they were able to deliver 175 infrastructure-centric and citizen-centric POCs in just a couple of years. Now, I've seen a lot of different cities around the world. Some people claim that they're the most innovative ones. I disagree. They were able to test out more types of solutions because they put the right framework in place. So that's a great way of doing that engagement. But that's just one city. So how did they engage? Well, the next thing they started getting involved with was the Global Organization of Smart Cities, which you've heard earlier. I'm also on the advisory board of. And that brings together 400 plus cities and technology vendors and institutions from around the world. And it's about sharing best practice and driving intercity proof of concepts. No, not every city should go out and do everything by themselves. Leverage what's already being done elsewhere. Learn from other cities' learnings. And then recently you've had the UTA come out, and they're doing a great job of taking that to the next level because they're providing test beds across Europe, across Asia as well. And then there's going to be some interesting ones you should be tracking going forward. And the one that really amazed me is a partnership recently that was put in place, a PPP, between Stanford University and Incheon in Korea. And what this partnership allows for is Stanford will get access to all the data that is captured from Incheon. That means across all the different government agencies, they're going to be this huge data lake to go out and experiment with. Now, why do they want that? Well, they've got students who have now a massive data lake to look at to go figure out what can you do with the city's data. Does that mean we can drive better operational efficiencies? Can we find ways to reduce costs, streamline processes so we can reduce headcount, or drive new revenue streams? You've basically got some of the brightest minds in the world now working with all your data in partnership with you to try and solve those problems. And I know there's some other initiatives going on in this space, but I can't tell you who they are, but keep an eye on it. And if you're a city, engage the universities, get those bright minds to come in and partner with you and try and figure out what you should do. All right, so the fun part. Now we're down to the end bit here. Which city is the smartest? And everyone always asks me about this whenever I have to present on smart cities. So I put in some work and I've decided to give you the definitive answer. The winner is Singapore, which is where I live. So I'm kind of happy about that. Well, it's sort of the winner. Let me explain what I mean by that. I love smart city rankings because I just think they're fun to take a look at to see how people are coming up with them. And one that I always track is from IMD out of Switzerland. And this is their top 10, which came out a couple of months ago. And Singapore does come across number one. Then you've got a few other cities within Europe. You've also got Auckland down in New Zealand. Taipei has done very well, coming in at number 8. And I've been to all of these cities, and I'd say they're all quite advanced cities. But then I thought, well, what about who's farther down the list? Because they look at over 100 cities. And also, I spend a lot of time traveling. Well, I used to spend a lot of time traveling around. But where are the other cities that I think are really advanced? So basically, I looked, well, where's Tokyo? Tokyo only gets ranked as the 79th smartest city in the world, and it's down 17 points in the last year, which I found kind of shocking. And Osaka, one of my other favorite cities, is down as well. So they're down 17 each in the rankings. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But then also China, which is leading in spending and initiatives for smart cities. I wanted to see where some of their cities are coming off, especially like Hangzhou with their City Brain initiative. And then I saw that all the Chinese cities probably went down on average nearly 20 points in the ranking. And it didn't make a lot of sense to me. And then it wasn't only just in Asia. I looked at what was going on in Italy, and I saw that the Italian cities didn't have a good year for the rankings. Two of them went down 52 and 124, which means, well, that's not a very good year. But then I thought, this is really not that clear. So why don't I go out and look at some other rankings and see how this compares? Because IMD looks at 100 different cities. ESA, Easy Park, and AT Kearney also looked at over 100 cities each. And they each look at between 30 to 100 plus different types of quantitative metrics to evaluate this. And I like this because if it's quantitative, we should have some method to the madness. We should have. Unfortunately, we don't. Because when you look at it, while Singapore comes across in the top 10 in all four, it's the only one that does. And then you start seeing some strange things, like Auckland is only ranked, number 58 in the world by Easy Park, but number 4 by IMD. Copenhagen gets ranked in the top 6 in 3 of them, but then number 45. And ESA, I mean, it doesn't even have the top number 1 ranked in there within IMD. So I looked it up, and it's London, which is ranked number 1 by ESA, 2 by Kearney, and number 50 by Easy Park. So if they're all using quantitative metrics, how can it be so varied? And then I decided to look more into it at some other cities. And there's more questions than answers. So Paris, I know that's always been ranked relatively high. It's ranked number 2 by Kearney, 3 by ESA, but then only number 61 by IMD. And then I looked at Tokyo, like I mentioned, one of my favorite cities in the world. It's ranked number 4 by ESA and Kearney, and only 79 by IMD. Hong Kong's ranked number 5 by Kearney, but only number 87. How do you go from 5 to 87 when you're using quantitative metrics? And then finally on this one, Beijing, it's ranked by number 9 by Kearney, but then in the 80 plus from the other ones. So it's very difficult to try and figure out what the real smartest city is. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. Well, if you're so smart, why don't you create your own smart city ranking? Great idea. So I'm proud to present the 2nd annual Charles Reed Anderson Perfect Smart City Ranking, or the C.R.A.P Smart City Ranking for short. And here's my C.R.A.P methodology. I didn't want to complicate it too much. So I just found the cities that ranked or were ranked by each of those 4 from IMD, ESA, Easy Park, and AT Kearney. I summed it up and I divided by 4. Like I said, it's important not to overcomplicate the C.R.A.P. So then what did my rankings show in the end? Singapore still does come out on top, but what you've seen is New York made a big push up this year and now ranks number 2, whereas last year it was down at number 5. You can also see that down in the bottom, Vienna had a bad year. They've gone down 6, whereas Washington, D.C.'s had a great year because they've gone up 6. So what conclusions can you draw from this C.R.A.P ranking? Not a lot, unfortunately. And this is the challenge, because all these rankings, whether it's my C.R.A.P ranking or any of the other ones, should be taken with a large, large pinch of salt. And why do I say that? It's because how do you rank something you can't define? Now think about the runners in this race. Let's say this is the finish line. It's easy to see that number 5 there, he'd be ranked number 1 because he's winning. Number 2 would be ranked number 2, and number 8 would be ranked number 3. We have a definitive line. We know how to measure this. Now, how do you rank a smart city when everybody on this call is going to have a different definition of what a smart city actually is? How do you define it? Which of the 30 government agencies should we be looking at? Which of the thousands of use cases should we be evaluating? And then who's going to spend the time to compile all this data and make something that is actually accurate? And this is the challenge I have with these rankings. I think they're fun to take a look at, but I don't really put too much confidence in them being accurate. So in short, smart city rankings are great marketing materials. They are not an accurate reflection of how smart a city is. So what does that mean? That means you have to beware the hype, because while I like having fun with the smart city rankings, they do actually scare me because they distract people. A lot of the cities that I work with are more focused on their ranking than they are about delivering solutions that will transform the way we work, live, and play. So enjoy the rankings, take a look at them and get a good laugh out of them. But remember, it's all about the delivery. So go out there and deliver the solutions that are going to transform your city. So closing thoughts on this. It's difficult to combine it all into one, but I'll try and give you a few tips. As you start there embarking on your journeys, whatever the next steps are, always think about it from a platform perspective. The more we put up different solutions with different silos, it becomes very complicated. Think about how you can aggregate this to give yourself a single version of the truth. Next one on this, engage the ecosystem, because you need to start working not just with other cities, but with the technology vendors, with people like the World Bank Group and IFC who are getting very active in the space and trying to set up standards and policies about where you should be going forward. Engage with the startup ecosystem, because that's where the innovation is going to come from. So start bringing this together more and actively talk to these communities. Don't think that knowledge is power, and if I give it away to somebody else, I become less powerful. Sharing is powerful, so collaborate more. Next one, you'll need those collaborations because you need more sources of innovation. No one should go out there and try and come up with all their own solutions. Leverage the best practice that's being done across the world. We have all the platforms we need right now to talk to each other. So share and start bringing in more different sources of innovation. Some could be from the startup community, some with partnerships with other cities or organizations like GoSmart or the Urban Technology Alliance. Get involved in there and bring these sources of innovation into your organization. And finally on this, set up an effective testing and evaluation procedure. If you want to start running a lot of proof of concepts, don't have a procedure that lasts 2.5 or 3 years. I see this far too often. It kills startups and it kills your innovation, because something I want to implement today is not going to be innovative in 2.5 or in 3 years. So Taipei did a great job of setting this up. Find ways to basically make it efficient. Test it quick, see if it works. If it does, great, move forward. Almost put an if then in. If we achieve our objectives, we do this. But find ways to improve that, because right now, smart cities, the reason it doesn't move that quickly is there's so many proof of concepts that are just dying and never going anywhere. So find a way to improve that process. So those are my final thoughts. I want to thank everybody for your time. If you want to reach out to me, you can definitely get a hold of me via LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter as well. If you find me entertaining in any way, you want to listen to my podcast, Tech Burst Asia is going to be on every major platform. And that's about it from me. So I just want to say thank you again for the invitation to speak today. And it's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope everybody has a great time over the next couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Charles, for your inspiring talk. I will just check if there are some questions on the chat, but at the same time, we have a couple of them. Actually, we shared with some questions with Roger. So it was actually quite interesting for us to see that you mentioned some points that indeed we are also kind of focusing in UTA. Platforms, not silos, indeed, and the engaging the ecosystem in particular. So these are the two main points that we are considering in UTA. So when you talk about the platform of platforms, so maybe a question from Roger was, indeed, you mentioned the Hitachi platform, how they are interested, and how are they capable of over dovetailing or joining other existing city platforms, or they kind of replace existing platforms in the cities with their own ones?
Okay, there's a number of different models that you'll get inside of Hitachi, because it's an immensely large organization. I think they have 380 something different companies inside of Hitachi. This group, Hitachi Asia, what they're creating is a platform right now for greenfield environments. So what they're doing is going out and then partnering with anybody who could be a building management system vendor. So it could be an HVAC guy, a lifts guy. And then they're partnering with all the network equipment manufacturer. So they're basically becoming the one neck to choke for that city. But then because they're controlling all of those different organizations and relationships, those people don't go out and then buy their own equipment. They buy everything centrally for them. So they take over the procurement process. And instead of everybody having their own servers and storage, everything is aggregated together. So they're taking that approach to it. But what I like is how they're combining all the data, and they realize it's you can create a consumer data ecosystem on the back of it. And the example their chief strategy officer gave me was, they do high-speed rail as a service in the UK. And I think they do, is it 2 billion or 4 billion customer journeys a year? So that's 2 billion or 4 billion consumer touch points. Why are they not finding ways to actually combine the platform they have to reach out to them as well? So it's a very well thought out. It's not just vaporware. Trust me, I've seen the documents behind it, which is what scared me, is they've put that much work into it already. But it's why it's quite exciting. And it's one of the few meetings I can say I've had in recent years where it transformed the way I think about smart cities.
Okay, great. Indeed, actually, we believe that there's a link between the first and the second point that you mentioned, the platforms and the engaging the ecosystem.
Mm.
So one of the objectives of UTA is indeed to promote the openness. So if we want to engage the ecosystem, we believe that the platform should be open. So we don't mean that it should be free, open for everyone, etc. But at least the open APIs, it should be in particular some open source solutions that could indeed engage the ecosystem, in particular local ecosystems, the startups, the SMEs, that they have these innovative ideas, but they indeed lack these platforms to which they can connect and they can exploit the data they can gather from the platform. So what do you think about this openness? Do you think that is also a key property that these platforms should have?
Yes, definitely, especially when it comes to cities, just because of the sheer volume and number of vendors that are going to be involved in it. It should be at the core of it is openness. The problem we have is a lot of cities won't be as open. They'll want to lock it down more. They'll set up their own platform, a proprietary platform, instead of being open. And that, while it sounds good on paper, can sometimes also basically hinder innovation going forward. So I'm always a bigger fan of when people are open with these two platforms, because I think the more people working together, and I don't think every city should have only their own platform. We should have platforms that can then be lifted and replaced into other cities as well, because we have to start driving cities in general, not just one or two here and there. And we're wasting a lot of effort, energy, and money by recreating the wheel every single time we start over. If I do something in Taipei City, when I go to New Taipei, which is right next door, I have to do the whole process all over again. Why is that? So there's got to be better ways to go about it. But unfortunately, as an industry, we're not overly good at collaboration.
Yeah, right, correct. So maybe a final question. Yes, indeed, the rankings were quite fun. What do we need to? We do need a way to learn from the best smart cities, right? So how can we better share best practices, in your opinion?
I think you guys have to keep doing a lot of the same stuff you are. I know within Go Smart, and I know you're part of that as well. It's about as soon as somebody does a proof of concept, write up the case study and share it out. I'm all for bringing in, I like quick proof of concepts where you set up specific success metrics and you can evaluate things quickly, but then share it with everybody. And then that's why I like being involved with Go Smart, because they've got 400 plus partners in there. I know you're building up a great ecosystem as well. So start going out there and you almost get a team together and talk to each of your partners and saying, fine, give us some of your best case examples. Here's our template we're going to use for a one-page case study, and just start creating volumes of this stuff and pushing it out, because we shouldn't be sitting here every time thinking I need this new use case. And then I go to Google and just randomly start searching. I'd much rather go into one of your organizations, be able to go through there. And if I'm looking for a smart street light that also has a camera on it, boom, here are the options I see. And I can see what worked, what didn't work, financial metrics, any of that. So I think it's all about sharing. Unfortunately, cities sometimes don't like putting, or organizations don't have the money to invest to create all of that marketing collateral and materials, but it's needed. So.
Okay, great. Yes, that is indeed all what UTA is about. So thank you again for sharing your thoughts with